Right, while we're setting that up, positioning, just kind of a quick poll, like the audience, anyone here that work with risk management framework on a daily basis, or it's kind of like your bread and butter? All right, we're heading a presentation over to you. Anyone has never heard of what RMF is? All right, perfect. That's what we're here.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So I think we can get started. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jaclyn Orcutt.
And I'm Cherie Laliberte.
And today we will be describing our modernized approach to the risk management framework to combat cyber threats. So Cherie and myself have been working in the cybersecurity realm as cybersecurity engineers for many years, and we've conducted numerous cybersecurity assessments for various systems and organizations. So throughout our time, we've seen RMF being used in a variety of different ways. And we've also adapted to adopt a more modernized, flexible, and customizable approach for cyber risk analysis based on RMF. So today we'll be describing our modernized approach to RMF and show you how you can implement this new approach within your organization. So today, Cherie and I are going to provide a brief introduction on what RMF is, describe the current challenges within RMF. Our modernized approach to RMF is driven by understanding the negative, or describing the current challenges and the negative outcomes to an organization that can affect the confidentiality, integrity, and availability, then prioritizing that application of security controls to prevent and mitigate those outcomes. To showcase this new modernized approach, we'll walk you through a case study that demonstrates how you can execute this approach within your organization to easily identify high risk. And then at the end of this presentation, we'll have about 10 to 5 minutes for question and answers. So you're probably wondering, what is RMF? So the National Institute of Science and Technology is a global industry standard that developed RMF in 2010, and it continues to be modernized. It's continued to be modernized over the years. So RMF has been developed to help organizations prepare and assess current risks. It's a comprehensive risk-based framework that is comprised of 7 different steps. So we have prepare, categorize, select, implement, assess, which will mainly be focused on authorize, and then finally continuous monitoring. And it's a cyclical cycle. This has also developed a group of special publications that cover various aspects of RMF. So we have, say, 853, 853 alpha, 837. These are all really great examples. 853 is comprised of a set of security controls that can be implemented within an organization to help ensure the security of data, of system data, as well as mitigating those risks. And something that we really would like to focus on today is the CIA triad. And that's where our modernized approach comes into play. So CIA, when you think of CIA, we're not talking about the Central Intelligence Agency. We're talking about confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So confidentiality is the who. So how is an organization securing sensitive information and data, and who actually has access to that information? For example, say you decide you want to go to the bank and open a security deposit box to store sensitive data that you may have. People don't know what's inside that safety deposit box. You're the only person who has access to that information, and you're the only individual who's authorized to access that within the bank, right? So there's confidentiality there because you're the only one who knows what's actually inside that box. Integrity. That's the what. What is the accuracy of the data that's being presented? So if you're the only person who has access to that safety deposit box, then other individuals can't access or take away whatever is being stored in that safety deposit box. We also touch on availability. So that's the when. When are you able to access your information and data? And when you access that safety deposit box, you're using a key that only you have to access that information. So the CAA triad focuses on the impact of the loss of data, right? So the loss of confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So we use this impact rating to focus our efforts when mitigating risks within an organization. So first we're looking at the impact, and then we start by categorizing our data, right? So using this modernized approach, we'll focus solely on confidentiality, integrity, and availability for an organization and tailor our assessments to focus on areas within the organization that pose a greater risk. So you may be wondering, what are the current challenges of RMF? So currently, when confidentiality, integrity, and availability are identified for an organization or even for a system, you're provided a set of security controls that require assessment, right? So within NIST 853, we have, I think it's about 1,007 security controls with revision 5. Controls and enhancements, and over 3,000 CCIs. That is a lot of data points to meet, right? And requirements to meet within an organization. So a lot of times organizations, when they are conducting risk assessments and assessing those controls, their focus is on this entire set of controls, as opposed to focusing in on what are my current risks and what is the most high risk items, and what does that impact the organization? So currently, organizations are using multiple resources and a lot of resources to try and meet all those security controls, as opposed to having a more focused assessment that's mitigating those higher risks, right? And I'm going to turn it over to Cherie.
Where are we at here? Where are we even talking about this? So our modernized approach to risk management framework is really focused on, like Jaclyn mentioned, on the organizational risk for entire business operations. So a lot of times, like we're seeing, organizations there's this perception that because there's so many controls, there's so many data points, that it ends up become a check in the box. Like, okay, I fulfilled, 50 controls, we're complying with that, we're non-complying for 30, and then it kind of becomes a number game stacking up. And it seems like it's kind of pass or fail audit test, like if you're taking a test, okay, if I hit 50 controls, then I'm compliant, then I pass the audit. That's really not the best approach to a risk management framework. So this kind of modernized approach is focused on understanding the actual business operations and what is most impactful for the operations in confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So if you have, let's say, a classified national security systems that is critical to maintain, let's say, our strategies and military national security, overseas, the confidentiality, integrity, and availability for that kind of systems and organization is going to be drastically different from, let's say, a university or a medical organization or whatever, or just like a website. And what we're focusing on is really understanding what is specific to your organization for whatever system that you're assessing or organizations. And we're, in addition, kind of with that, understanding what exactly is the operations, what is the most impactful. And then we're looking at what is the specific mitigation. So what is the implementation that the organization already have? What is the specific likelihood of the threat landscape? Again, kind of going back to my example for a national security systems, their most likely adversaries are national state actors with abundance of resources and knowledge and techniques, and they can pull back on. Versus for a smaller organization that might, have focus more on availability, they just need to be the website running so the customers can actually access the website and utilize their services, then their threat landscape will be very different. And with that, and the implementation of security is going to be drastically different too. If we're talking about national security systems, you have millions and millions of dollars that you can pour on security implementation. However, for a smaller organization, you might be outsourcing a lot of these, or you might be trying to look for really cost-effective methods and resources to do any kind of security implementations. So with our approach that we focus on what is your business strategy, what is your operations, and pinpointing what is impactful for you, and then really prioritizing the security controls, specific to your organization, and supporting, going really beyond cybersecurity. It's not just about security implementation. It's going back to confidentiality, integrity, and availability, and how it affects your operations to continue operating. So next, we're kind of walked through, kind of went through the high level with the theory. We're going to kind of walk through a example of how, just to kind of demonstrate how you can implement this modernized approach. So let's say we have someone, Selena works for a nonprofit organization called We Help. And I know we weren't really creative with that name. And this organization provides free education resources to disadvantaged populations. Most of the funding that the organization raises goes directly into the organization's mission to ensure that their website can stay alive and all the customers can actually access and really maximize the support that they can provide, which is, providing these free education resources. And Selena is tasked to identify what is the organizational risk and to be able to provide recommendations to the leadership in order to make financial decisions and really kind of feed into the overall business strategy. And one thing to know here, we're assuming this is a really small nonprofit organization where the budget for security is very limited. So we're going to kind of see how we're going to utilize really cost-effective methods of implementing a very huge risk management framework that has so many controls and data points, and really focus on what's important to Selena's organization. So first, we're kind of preparing for the risk assessment. One thing to note here, whether you're doing a self-assessment or if you're assessing another organization or system, we want to understand what exactly is the mission and the business operations. So in this case, the organization doesn't process any sensitive data. We don't store anything like that. We're not really applicable to HIPAA laws or financial regulations. We don't really care about unauthorized changes to any of our data. If we have a typo or there's something, maybe the courses are in the wrong pathways on the website, it's completely fine. Where customers can kind of figure that out. It has very minimal impact. However, we do depend on this website to be accessible and having the database of all the training resources and records data, and staff can use the website to communicate. So we're looking at first, having that baseline of confidentiality, integrity, and availability for the specific organization. And let's say we're selecting low, moderate. So now we're going into actually developing the plan to conduct a risk analysis. So Selena's the only one that's doing this risk analysis. So it's not going to be very practical for her to say, I'm going to look at every single control outlined or selected based on that baseline within the risk management framework. It's going to take months and years to do a risk analysis just because of the amount of data points. So instead, she's going to focus on a couple of things like awareness and training, contingency planning, incident response, as kind of have a limited scope for the risk assessment. So I'm looking at everything. And because of limitations for cost and resources, Selena's going to do a self-assessment within an organization and utilizing cost-effective methods like just interviewing, talking to people, doing documentation reviews, and on-site visits at the regional offices. Another really good thing to do during the development phase of the approach to risk analysis is to do a little bit in-depth research on what is the actual threat landscape specific to your organization and operations. So in this case, Selena is using open source like Google's and news websites and LinkedIn to look at, okay, what is the threats that's actually out there for my type of organization and size? And during that research, she discovered, okay, we're not usually the targets of national state actors. However, there's a lot of incidents reported that comes from really just not having good security best practices and like phishing attempts, like staff clicking on a suspicious link in their email and they're kind of curious, like, oh, like what is like, I'm gonna win a Amazon, gift card. And that leads to a cyber breach and loss of data. So now that Selena kind of determined, okay, this is my approach that we're going to self-assess, this is the message I'm using, she's going to actually go into conducting the actual risk analysis. So within that, she's doing interviews with leadership, with IT support staff, and also just general staff. A lot of times, it's very surprising the kind of information that you can actually find out with just talking people that are not necessarily in technical or security roles within an organization. So in our scenario, Selena talked to IT support staff, discovered that, okay, we have monthly backup to our data, but is not covered at all by the contract. And she has requested to review the backup tapes just to kind of validate, what, does the backup tape actually exist? Are they actually of good integrity? If, something happens to our organization today, will we have, what is the response time, will we have the data to be able to get backed up and get the operations back on running? She's doing site visits with the different regional offices. And this is, I think, kind of a cliche example, finding sticky notes with passwords under the keyboard. And she's also doing document reviews of okay, what is the current high-level policies and strategies that the organization already have? So within that, she discovered that contingency planning and incident response is actually not mentioned at all. And the policy at the organizational level does require security awareness training. However, upon interviews with all the staff, no one has attended any security awareness training for at least months or even years going back in the organization. So after that, Selena's going into actually analyzing, collecting, and consolidating all these data points, all of these informations, and drafting up a formal risk assessment report. And she validated and tested all the backup tapes. Okay, we have confirmed that those are dated within the last 30 days. They are operable. Website. We at least have confidence that we do have the backups to kind of return to operations as soon as possible. And within the risk reports, that's where we really want to consolidate all the data. And again, going back to the confidentiality, integrity, and availability for the organization. Within that, we care mostly for this organization about availability. And from all the interviews and site visits documents, Selena identified all the missing gaps within the organization. For example, we require on a policy corporate level to have security awareness training. However, it's not actually implemented in practice. We do have IT support app. That is a great, mitigation. So, if the operation goes down, we have the IT that can, go pull all the data, backup tapes, and then you utilize that to return to operations. We're also considering, based on the previous industry research, what is the actual threat likelihood and impact for Selena's organization. So for example, we have identified that based on industry research, a lot of cyber incidents for the similar size, for nonprofit organization of the similar size, that a lot of times just happens from, cyber incident just kind of happens from not having good best practices for security awareness. So, and we identified, okay, it's required, but it's not actually implemented. Maybe we want to look into making a recommendation of implementing that security awareness training. And we're coming up with an overall risk rating, let's say with moderate. And next, we're going to go into really the actions and decision which is an important part of a risk analysis. We have this report now, we've identified what is the missing gaps, what is the current mitigations and implementations. We've identified what is the most impactful to our organization's confidentiality, integrity, and availability. What should we do about that? So this is where we're going to actually having specific actions and goals from that risk analysis. It's great that we're doing a report, we're doing, something to assess the organization risk, but what do we want to do about that? So for example, these are just kind of some of the examples that in our scenario that Selena is doing. So she's going to schedule a follow-up meeting with leadership to present the risk analysis that she's conducted, the report from that, all the data points that has been collected. She's going to recommend actually implementing a security awareness training. And this can be done using completely free open source. You know, if we just go on like YouTube videos or like LinkedIn learnings, like there's a lot of good examples for how can you do a good security awareness training. She's going to recommend, okay, maybe we should consider increasing the incident response coverage that we have from the IT contractor, which there might be a financial cost that arises from that, but we can go into doing an actual cost analysis, comparing different vendors and the coverage, because we identified that as a missing gap within organizations. And we also want to have really specific goals, like let's say, for example, within 6 months, now that we've implemented the security awareness training, let's do a survey on actually confirming and validating the effectiveness of that security awareness. Within 1 year, we can initiate a partnership with similar organizations to provide contingency planning. So let's say something happens to Selena's organization and their website is down, no one can access it. We can turn to our sister organization and say, okay, we want to have a little bit, you know, reputation protection and at least redirect our customers to go to your website. So they're not just completely like in the loss. They at least have that continuous support, even if it's a partner organization. So what is really the results using this modernized approach? One is we're having a very specific understanding of what is a specific threat landscape to your organization. What is the current SAPs? Kind of going back, you know, based on for different organizations, your threat landscapes, the capabilities of your adversary is going to be very different. We're looking at what is the likelihood of this actually happening. You know, if we have passwords on sticky notes under a keyboard, okay, there's, you know, if this is a, let's say a publicly accessible office, the likelihood for the threat actually realizing that someone's going to take your password, try to log in with your credentials might be relatively higher. What is the impact to the organizations? What is the immediate actions, which is all the decisions and actions that we've just talked about? What is the future goals? And really, the idea for this modernized approach is going beyond cybersecurity and really focusing on organizational risk. It's not just about, okay, we have implemented X, Y, and Z tools. We have all these expensive tools that are doing all these things, but really allowing the leadership to make a risk-informed decision and therefore make financial investments based on that risk-informed decisions that is specific to the organization. There's no point in understanding, you know, oh, there's really all these scary like hackers, you know, Russian hackers from like overseas, if that's not going to be applicable to your specific scenario. And the most importantly with this approach is that we want to have a repeatable process that puts emphasis on your specific security controls to continuously monitor. So now we've done, let's say we've implemented security effectiveness. Let's continuously monitor that. Is the training actually effectiveness? Do we actually need to improve on that training? And again, in the future, maybe the organization has expanded and we can come back and do a full assessment, or maybe we still have limited resources and we just specifically focus on like incident response, specifically focus on security awareness trainings and really just monitoring that, because we have already identified that is the most important impactful controls specific to my business operations. So, and I think, yep, that concludes my our presentations. I will just say a disclaimer: we had a lot of content due to the limitation of time, but we're happy to discuss a little bit in further. There's only so much we can cover possibly in 20 minutes. It's a very comprehensive framework, but the idea is we're focusing on business operations and what's really impactful to your specific scenario. And we don't have to look at everything because that can turn into a really daunting task. And, maybe we don't have the resources, we don't have the time. We need to focus on what actually continuing our business operations and not just, oh, we need to buy this tool. What are we doing with that tool? So, and again, like I said, had to fit a lot of information in 20 minutes, but we're both happy to discuss further in details if anyone's curious. And here's our contacts and LinkedIn information. And now we're open for any comments or questions or anything at all. Yep.
Hi, I was wondering, do you guys partner with any other organizations in your research?
So our roles are a little bit unique. So like both Jaclyn and I are independent assessors. So we're usually what's called like a third-party organizations. And, you know, we work with a variety of systems. And so essentially in our daily basis, like we interact with a lot of organizations, you know, both in like defense sector as well as the commercial sectors, organizations that have at very large scale, but also in a smaller scales. And this is more just kind of based on a lot of our observations and just experience these organizations and kind of what we have, you know, kind of identify as sometimes what risk management framework becomes is a number, you know, checklist approach and kind of like how our modernized approach is to help all different organizations. So hopefully that answers the question. Any other questions, comments, or? All right, easy enough for us.
Thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate
Yep,
it.
thanks for having us.